Hello and welcome everybody. My name is Erica. As you can see, I have a little furry friend that I want to introduce. This is my baby, Chloe. Look at her. Say hi. So this is my little baby. And I just want to welcome you guys to Youth, the best night of the week. So, today, with my little furry friend and and my other little furry friend, we're gonna play a game. Delilah, stop it. Okay, stay. That was really sad. Okay, Chloe, come back. No. Okay, well, we're gonna play Nailed It or Failed It Cat Edition. Okay. Ow. 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 Hey. Alright. So, get your drinks. Get your snack. Here we go. Oh my goodness. This is so, no, gonna make it. I have faith. What do y'all think? I think this cat's gonna make it because a boating cat is the best cat, right? Nailed it. Let's see it. That was sad. Okay. No. I mean, I've seen my cat, not this one. I've seen my cat do that. Yes. Go cat. That was disturbing. Oh. Okay, what do you think? Give me a kiss if you think yes. Oh, she says no. She said it was a hard no. Okay, I don't. I'm against you, Chloe. Yeah! Oh. I was ready for that. I was ready. What do you think? Hey. Love me. Love me. There you go, good girl. Yes.
Run.
Yeah! Oh my gosh. I've seen this one. Hard no. That snow is slippery. I fell yesterday and it was not nice. Not nice. Nope. No, Felicia. No. Oh, yeah, you already done goofed. Right there. we swim? You wanna go for a swim? Swim. I think it is a failed it. Failed it. There's another one. That's a big jump. Nailed it. Failed it. Oh, whoa. Can you let go of my arm? No, she probably doesn't. What do you think? Oh, you love me. She loves me, but failed it. Some hype music right there. The music she should get when she runs. You're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. Oh. She's done. Anyways, I hope y'all enjoy this message tonight. I am going to enjoy this message tonight. And I will see y'all soon. Do. Bye, guys.
Hey guys, welcome back. I am stoked that you're here. Hope you enjoyed that game that we just did a moment ago. I think it's hilarious. There's 3 volumes of that game actually, and we've done volume 1. That was volume 2. And so maybe in the future we will look at volume 3. But it was nice to see some of you guys guess it correctly and some of you guys guess it incorrectly. Well, listen, tonight we're going to jump right in. We're going to jump right into our series called Plot Twist, where we're looking at the life and the story of Joseph. And tonight we've got a huge chunk of scripture, but don't be worried. I'll do some summarizing, we'll do some reading, and I would just love to pull out some truths from this. And so I'm hoping you're with me. And listen, interact in the comments. It just makes YouTube way more fun. It makes Friday night way more fun. If you have an observation about scripture, maybe even if it doesn't necessarily fit the conversation that's going on in the chat, but it's something particular as to what we're talking about, man, just throw it in there. Who cares? Spam the chat with lots of stuff in relation to what we're talking about. That would be awesome. And so up until this point, we're talking about this guy named Joseph. A lot of things have happened. He was the favorite son amongst all his brothers, but he got sold into slavery by his brothers. I mean, it was a terrible situation. Then once he got sold into slavery, he eventually was put over in charge of kind of the household of this powerful man named Potiphar. But when he was there in Potiphar's house, he got accused and framed for doing something pretty dramatic and pretty intense. And it wasn't true. And even though he was framed of something that wasn't true, he got thrown in jail. But when he was in jail, he actually was able to use the gifting God had given him to interpret the dreams of two prisoners. And it was kind of cool to see him interpret these two weird dreams, and then the dreams came true. And so Joseph just said, look, when you get to Pharaoh, when you get to kind of the head honcho, when you get to the leader of this whole land, don't forget me. And so the story kind of ended there, being like, awesome, maybe he's not going to be forgotten. But then what happens is the dreams come true that he had just as he predicted, but the gentleman, the cupbearer that had the dream, forgot. He didn't mention his name to Pharaoh. And so for 2 years now, we're at the point where Joseph's been in jail. For 2 years, he's been in jail. He's been forgotten about completely. And here's where we're picking up in the story. He's in prison for a long time. And then someone else has some weird dreams. And it's Pharaoh, the leader of Egypt. And the dreams are super kind of disturbing to him. He can't figure it out. And so he's chatting to his cupbearer. Remember, someone who also had a weird dream and interpreted it by Joseph said, man, I'm having these weird dreams. And he explains them. And the cupbearer goes, oh, right. I met someone one time that actually could interpret dreams. How cool is that? So even 2 years later, he still did remember Joseph. He says, yeah, I know a guy, when I was in prison, actually, this guy interpreted my dreams and it came true. Now, Pharaoh gets really upset with the cupbearer, as you can imagine, and throws him in prison and says, but I need to see this guy that can interpret these dreams because they're really troubling me. And so where we're picking up today is in Genesis 41. Genesis 41, verse 14. And I'm hoping you can join me along with it. It says this in verse 14. It says, Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he was quickly brought from the dungeon. And when he had shaved and changed his clothes, he came before Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Joseph, I had a dream, and no one can interpret it, but I have heard it said that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. Now, just picture this, okay? This is Joseph's time to shine. Like, this is his big break. He's in front of one of the most powerful men in the world at that point, as he knew it. And he's like, this is his chance to make a good impression. This is his chance to make a difference. And what do you think he's going to say? I've heard you can interpret dreams. I know what I would say. Like, I'm your guy. Right? Like, yeah, you're in the right place. But Joseph says this in verse 16. He says, I can't do it. What? I can't do it? What do you mean you can't do it? It's like, Joseph, you got a chance here to make your break. But he says this, I can't do it. Joseph replied to Pharaoh, but God will give to Pharaoh the answer he desires. He says, I can't, but God can. I love that. And though Joseph is in front of one of the most powerful men on the planet, it's his time to kind of, maybe make himself look great and get out of the situation he's in. He doesn't do that. He says, I can't, but God can. I won't, but God will. And I just think, man, as we talk about being Christians in today's culture and having a life and living a life of faith, it's so important to put that phrase, I can't, but God can, into your pocket, into your Bible, into your phone for days when you're feeling discouraged or days when you're feeling challenged. See, there are so many circumstances in our lives where we feel like we can't do something, where we can't. But the truth is that God can. We believe God will. We believe that all things are possible through Christ. All things are possible with God. And I don't know what scenarios you find yourself in that maybe feel too big for you to bear or for you to carry alone. Well, be encouraged that in this sense, Joseph was using his gifting and he's like, look, it's not about me, it's about God. I can't, but God can. I just want to encourage you with that maybe there is something you're going through that you can't handle on your own, but God can. And it's just this reminder for us very quickly, just to return back to the one who can. Because there's so many areas in our lives that we can't handle on our own, but thankfully, thanks be to God who's got us and who wants to care for us. And so he says, look, I can't, but God will give you the interpretation. And then it goes on to say this. Pharaoh describes his dreams. If you want to hear some weird dreams, tune in. Here, verse 17, it says this. Pharaoh says to Joseph, in my dream, I was standing on the bank of the Nile. And when out of the river, there came 7 cows, fat and sleek. And they grazed amongst the reeds. After them, 7 other cows came up, scrawny and very ugly and lean. I had never seen such ugly cows in all the land of Egypt. These were some weird-looking cows. The lean, ugly cows ate up the fat cows that came up first. And even after they ate them, no one could tell that they had done so. They just looked as ugly as before. And then I woke up. I mean, that's a weird dream. These fat cows coming out of the water, getting eaten by these skinny, ugly cows. And then there's this other dream. It says, and in my dream, I saw 7 heads of grain, and full and good and growing on a single stalk. And after them, 7 other heads sprouted, withered and thin and scorched by the east wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 good heads. And I told the magicians this, but none of them could explain it to me. I mean, these are some weird dreams. You got fat cows and thin cows. You've got kind of healthy grain and ugly and withered grain. And the withered cows and grain are eating the healthy cows and healthy grain. And so you can imagine this is just weird. And before we jump into what Joseph says the interpretation is, I would just love, just for fun, we don't interpret dreams. Like, I don't have the gift of interpreting dreams, but let's just say if we just, for conversation's sake and for the sake of the comments, if you could come up with some sort of weird meaning of what this could mean, what would you say it is? Like, let's just wrong answers only. You might know the right answer, but wrong answers only. What's a funny interpretation of fat cows getting eaten by skinny cows and good grain getting eaten by bad grain? Let's just for fun, hit it up in the comments. What's a funny interpretation of this dream? Some of those were ridiculous, but also hilarious. Well, the actual interpretation that Joseph gives, he says, listen, this is what's going to happen. These dreams you're having are actually very important. And what it means is that there's going to be 7 years of abundance. 7 years of abundance followed by 7 years of famine. It's like you're going to have more food than you know what to do with, and then you're going to have no food whatsoever. And so he says that the fat cows and the good grain represent the abundance years, followed by the skinny cows, the ugly cows, and the bad grain kind of following that as well. And so he says there's going to be this season where you're having a lot and very, very little, nothing, basically. And he says what's going to happen is that in the season of famine, in the season when you've got nothing, you're going to forget about the abundance of the season before. Like when you have nothing, you're going to forget the goodness that you once had. And I think right from the get-go, there's an application here. That oftentimes when we go through troubling times, when we feel like we've lost things, we will forget the goodness that once was. And it's kind of just a part of who we are as humans. We often forget the good things God has done. Trouble might come and all of a sudden we forget how great God has been in our life. And it reminds me of a quote that my mentor gave me as a young man. And it really, really meant a lot. It said, Jordan, when you're in the dark, don't forget about what you heard in the light. See, oftentimes when we're in good times and we're in great times with God, we hear things and God encourages us from His Word, and we see, God shows us His provision and His hand. But then there's times when we don't necessarily feel like we're in the light, like when times seem darker, times seem tougher, times feel like a famine. We often forget what we heard in the light, and we just kind of get surrounded by our situation. And so it's interesting that he says, look, when you're in the famine, you're going to forget about what happened in the abundance. And that's true of us a lot of times when we find ourselves treated unfairly like Joseph was, or we find ourselves in situations that maybe don't seem great. We need to hear this reminder that we can't forget about what was good. But more specifically about what's going on here in this story is Joseph is saying, look, really, when you're in the famine, you're going to realize you didn't handle the blessing and the abundance of the food well. Like you weren't responsible with it. And so he says, what you need to do is you need to find a man who is wise, a man who is discerning, it says, and that he needs to manage this new initiative that you've got to take by saying that every time we gather food In those 7 years, every time we gather or we harvest food, a fifth of that will get stored looking forward in faith to that day when we won't have a lot. So it's like, man, when you harvest stuff, you got to keep a fifth of it for that rainy day type thing. I don't know if your parents ever told you, look, you got your first part-time job. You need to, save some. You need to be generous and give some to God. And then you need to save some for like kind of a rainy day or whatever. That's kind of what is happening here is like, look, knowing there's a famine coming, let's not be irresponsible with all this food of abundance. Rather, let's take a fifth of it and let's save it for the future. And so what happens is he says, you need to find a man to manage this. You need to find someone to manage this. And Pharaoh says, who do I find to do this? In verse 38, why don't we just read it? It says this. So Pharaoh asked them, can we find anyone like this man? One in whom is the Spirit of God. It's like, where do we find someone that has such discernment and wisdom? And then he says this to Joseph in verse 39. Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning as wise to you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with the respect to the throne will I be greater than you. And so Pharaoh takes this guy who was sold by his own family into slavery, and then he was framed for something he didn't do, and then he was thrown into prison, and then he was forgotten about. I mean, we talked about last week, demotion after demotion after demotion. And eventually he gets promoted to basically the second most powerful person in Egypt. I want you to think, we can't even fathom what that would be like today. That would be like being the worst person on earth, being elevated to one of the most powerful positions in our society. He even goes on to say this in verse 41, I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh took off his own ring from his finger, and he put it on Joseph's finger. He dressed him in robes of fine linen and a gold chain around his neck. I mean, the dude had it, okay? And it says this, and then he had him ride in a chariot as his second in command, and people would shout before Joseph, make way. Thus, he was put in charge of the whole land of Egypt. I want you to think about that. He went from nothing to basically the second in command to Pharaoh. This is insane. And oftentimes when we talk about living this life for God, I think one of the ways we can live a life of faith and we can grow in our Christian faith is to really believe that greater things are yet to come, that God actually has plans for us that are greater than our own. And I wonder if you were able to ask Joseph, what was his hopes? What was his expectations? Was maybe as he sat in that cell, he just said, man, I'm just hoping for a good meal tomorrow. Or maybe he's saying I just want to see my family. I want to get out of this prison. I don't think for a moment Joseph probably envisioned the fact that he would one day have such prestige and such power. And I wonder, perhaps, when you look at your future, what do you believe God has for you? Do you have a big vision of what God has for you? And maybe just for conversation's sake, and again, just for fun, no one's going to hold you to this. I would like to see in the chat in a moment, kind of, when you think of actually your future career, just for a conversation, I know not everybody has this figured out, and especially our high school students, you have adults all the time saying, what are you doing after university? Or after high school, you're going to university or college or whatever. And we're not putting any pressure on you that way, but just for conversation's sake, and just for maybe some laughs in the chat, what's maybe some things that you're actually hoping to do after high school? Maybe you want to travel, maybe you want to go to the university, college. What's the career? Let's just see it in the chat. I'll give you 60 seconds just to discuss around that question. Let's do it. Those are awesome. It's so cool to see what some of you are thinking. And listen, those may change, but it's just fun to kind of talk about those things. And so I'm believing God has great things in store for you. But could you fathom for a moment that God has plans? He has goals. He has desires for your life that are greater than you can think, dream, or imagine. The thing about Joseph is it wasn't about getting Joseph to a better place in regards to his finances or trying to bless him, with just kind of a bigger house to live in. For Joseph, God elevated him to this purpose, really, and what's great about this is the fact that he was being used by God, which we're going to see in a few moments. See, God, I believe, has amazing plans for you, but his plans aren't primarily for you to get massively rich and to be like Jeff Bezos or to be like some of these, his main goal for you is to just be obedient and follow him into really doing ministry and accomplishing his goal in this is to make disciples of all nations, teaching them to obey him and baptizing them. And so that when we think about all that God has for us, that's what we're talking about, is the fact that God has plans to use you that are greater than you could ever dream or imagine. In Ephesians 3:20, it says this, "Now to him who is able to do far more abundantly than all we ask or think, according to the power within us." It's like he does more than, like, God goes greater. He's bigger than all we could dream or imagine. I mean, Jesus himself said this. He said, "Truly I say to you, whoever believes in me will do the works that I do, but he will do greater works than these." It's like God has plans for you that are way bigger than even you can imagine. And it might not be to fill your bank account or to make you the most powerful person in the world, but they are greater for you to be used by him in ways you can't even imagine. And so I just want to encourage you, believe that there's greater things still to come. Another thing that I think is clear as we look at the life of Joseph and ways to kind of live out our faith is really the importance of forgiving past hurts. And I know that this can be tricky and depending on what's happened in your life, but I think there's something really interesting here. If we jump back into Scripture, is seeing how powerful it was for Joseph to forgive past and to forgive and forget some past hurts. See, once the 7 years of abundance began happening, it says that Joseph found himself a wife, and he actually had 2 kids. And this is what it says in verse 50. It says, "Before the years of famine came, 2 sons were born to Joseph. It says Joseph named his firstborn Manasseh." Say that with me, Manasseh. And it meant this. It meant, "It is because God has made me forget all my trouble and all my father's household." That's the name of Manasseh. Wish my name had some cool meaning like that. 52, verse 52 says, "The second son was named Ephraim. And it said, 'It is because God has made me fruitful in the land of my suffering.'" Joseph names his 2 sons these Hebrew names, even though he's living in Egypt. And the first is Manasseh. And Manasseh means that the Lord has made me forget all my trouble. See, oftentimes hurts and troubles in life, they're like bungee cords that kind of get tied onto us. And if we don't understand and work with God to forgive those who've hurt us and to actually move on from some of these things that may be very painful, they actually can act as bungee cords that prevent us from walking into the freedom and the victory that Jesus has for us. And Joseph makes it clear, like unforgiveness and bitterness and resentment are these bungee cords that pull us back. And Joseph makes it clear, it says that some way for when he moved on allowed him to actually live victoriously for God. Perhaps you may never be able to forget what has happened in your life. We are told that, listen, our desire, God's desire for us rather, is to really bring forgiveness to those that have hurt us. And just as we've been forgiven by God, we too are to extend forgiveness. So he names Manasseh, and then he names his other one is named Ephraim. The second son is named Ephraim, and it means this. It means, "It's because God has made me fruitful in the land of my suffering." I believe this, that Manasseh leads to Ephraim. That by able to let go of things that are holding you back will set you up to be able to thrive in the land of your suffering. Have you been carrying some hurt in your heart? Have you been beating yourself up over something? Listen, I like how Paul says this. Paul says, "Brothers and sisters, I don't consider myself yet to have taken a hold of it, but one thing I do, I forget what is behind and I strain toward what is ahead." And that's my encouragement to you. Much like Joseph, I am encouraging you to forgive those that have hurt you, maybe some things that happened in the past, and I know this can be tricky depending on your situation, but to forgive those that have hurt you and to somehow live victoriously through Jesus, that he might be able to help you live and thrive even in the midst of your suffering that you may be going through now. And so we talked about believing that there's greater things to come. We talked about forgetting what is behind. And then I want to encourage you as we come to an end of living with the end in mind. See, the whole idea of Joseph's plan was to say, let's be responsible. Let's not hoard all the food now and just eat it all now, but let's store it up for when the famine would come. And so they were living with this understanding that actually it's going to be worth it down the road. Decisions we make today will impact our future. Similarly, in the Christian walk, we do the exact same thing. We live and we obey God now, but sometimes that are difficult. I mean, I can imagine as Joseph was taking food and storing it up in cities and, hanging on to it, people probably thought he was crazy. Like, man, look at all this food. Why are we hanging on? Why are we not eating it? Why are we not enjoying it? Why are we kind of holding back now? But Joseph had a different understanding. He was living with the end in mind. And I'm just reminded of the passage that Jesus says in Matthew 6:19. He says, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moths and vermin," what an interesting word, vermin, "destroy, and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves in heaven where moths and vermin do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." See, it's tempting nowadays to want to collect for ourselves money, prestige, power, relationships. We want things. We want status now. But Jesus says, look, actually, I want you to store things up in heaven. I want you to live a life that is actually honoring Him and looking forward to heaven. And so my encouragement to you is this: as much like Joseph and how he led through this interesting time of actually doing what mattered most, looking forward to a better day, is I'm encouraging you to do that. To make hard decisions now that will set you up for success in the future. To make decisions that honor God now, and I believe you will be honored in the future. And that one day you'll be able to look back over your life and say, man, the sacrifice was worth it. Saying yes to God was worth it. See, one day I believe that you and I will actually be in heaven together. And we will look back over the times that seemed so hard and we had to sacrifice so much, but we will know that we made it was the right decisions and that it was all worth it. I love that one song that says, man, when we get to heaven, we will say it was worth it all. It was worth it all. See, I want to encourage you to believe in this life of faith that better things are yet to come. I want you to forgive and move on from some things that have been holding you back. And thirdly, I want you to live with the end in mind, with heaven in mind, and not store up and try and be popular now and make decisions of how you can be happy now, but to live with the end in mind that one day we will meet God. Listen, I'd like to encourage you. If you've been enjoying these messages, maybe God has taught you something, would you actually write us, whether it's via email or DM or on Instagram? And I would love to just hear what God is doing in your life. And so maybe we could have some of you share some testimonies, whether on your phone or via message. I would love to do that because we want to hear from you guys on Friday nights. And so listen, God has great things in store for you. He wants you to move on from things that have been holding you back. And I believe He wants you to make decisions now that are honoring to God. And as you've seen, it's amazing what happens when we honor God with our small decisions. He begins to elevate us to influence and places that we could never imagine. So that's my encouragement to you guys. Kept it brief this week, hopefully. Listen, we love you, and we'll see you again next week. Take care. Peace.